Hello, hello. It has been a minute since I have been in this space, and it feels really lovely to be back. I'm on the road, and I left Tahoe. Actually, I left Utah on July 14th, and then I spent some time in Tahoe with siblings on a reunion, and then I went to my brother's place in Folsom to pick up this big rig and get started. So I actually left on Pioneer Day, which is the 24th, for this journey. And it's been so beautiful. I thought it would be, I don't know, I felt very called to go to the Northwest and to do it alone. And it's very beautiful because what I have noticed is that so many lovely things have been taking place in my experience that I never would have thought. I felt called to do this and I thought, oh, it will be this beautiful experience with travel and with meeting new people and places. I guess I never really understood the depth of what would be stirred within me to kind of change. And so I want to speak to this tonight. Um, because I didn't choose a theme for August, um, being on the road just has, it started out really quick and almost like fast and furious, going through things, going through places, and I really felt like I was a tourist. And now that I've come out of Oregon and I'm just into Washington, and I found a place on a farm through Harvest Host, and I'm going to be here for 4 days. And luckily they have a hookup, and I'm just here. I've just been out in the pasture with the horse, and it's nice and quiet and slow. I'm just slowing all of this down to kind of integrate what's happening. So I wanted to bring what's moving through me here tonight because as I sit with myself and as I sit with clients, I notice that this is not just me, it's not personal, it's collective. And maybe some of what I'm going to speak to here might be helpful for you or someone that you know and love. So I've been noticing all the ways that I've been hiding and I've hidden myself throughout my life, not necessarily physically, but by managing what other people were allowed to see. So through perfectionism or people pleasing or being okay or being capable or taking care of everyone else or presenting myself in a way that I thought I needed to be experienced by others. And so, um, becoming aware of this, I'm beginning to understand things differently. So, and what I'm beginning to understand is what is possible when I can release the idea or the need to be perfect. Um, so I I don't want to say that people pleasing and perfectionism are bad. Actually, they have helped us adapt, and they're adaptations from something that we came to believe about ourselves when we were younger. And sometimes it's an attempt to manage how we are being experienced by others. So this is the idea. If I present myself correctly, maybe I can control what you see and protect what I'm afraid you won't accept. I'm going to say that again. If I present myself correctly, whatever I think that is, maybe I can control what you see in me, and then I can protect what I'm afraid you won't accept. So it's such an innately intelligent way of finding safety, approval, and belonging. So here are some questions. Um, what does perfectionism, or where does perfectionism show up in how you present yourself? Have you ever noticed? What are you afraid someone might see if you don't get it right? What might your perfectionism be actually protecting? That's a that's a good question. That's the one I've been sitting with, like, what am I actually think I'm protecting by trying to be a certain way or be perceived? And what becomes possible when I no longer need to protect that image? So I don't know if I've shared this before, if you've heard me share this, but I think it was probably a few years ago, a couple years ago, one of my teachers said something that was like, it felt not confrontational, but it felt like a dagger in my heart. And this was what the idea is, that people pleasing is actually can sometimes function as a manipulation. And that was very confronting for me because I never ever thought that I was intentionally trying to manipulate someone. It's that I'm not trying to control you, I'm trying to control your experience of me. Does that make sense? And if I think back on my life, I probably should receive an Academy Award because I was like a chameleon. I would go over here and be this version for these people. And if you didn't like that, then fine, I can be this instead. If you need me to be stronger, I can be stronger. If you need me to be quieter or smaller, I do that well too. Um, and all the ways, all the levels and layers of us doing this. So here are some questions. Have you ever noticed yourself becoming a different version of yourself with different people? Different versions of yourself with different people? That was something, as I think back now, I remember as I would go doing this, I remember thinking in my mind, and it was so subtle. It was like an awareness that I wasn't aware of. It was subconscious for sure. I remember thinking, how strange that when I'm with these people, yeah, Michelle, story of my life, right? I would go over here and I would function and say things differently than if I was over, than I would go over with this group of people. And I remember thinking, because some of these people had really strong opinions, and I would quietly just observe them and think, how do I think about that? That makes sense, but not all of it. And then I'd go over here and I'd be like, well, that makes sense, but not all of it. And then I remember thinking, what do I actually think? What do I feel about that? And I didn't know. I remember thinking, what do I really think about that? Can I slow it down to inquire about how and get clear on where do I stand in all of this? So, another question. What are you hoping to receive or avoid when you do become this different version? That's a good question. Back then, I don't think I could have answered that question. Now I'm thinking about these questions a lot and noticing how often I've been a different person for different people in a lot of situations over these years. And the last question here about the perfectionism, and I like to call it the suffocation of perfectionism, because for me, it has literally felt like liberation from suffocation to step out of that way to be and be more present with myself. So that's what we're going to talk about. But here's this last question here is, can I let other people have their experience of me without making their experience determine who I need to be? Can I let anyone that I'm experiencing, being in relationship with, have their experience of me without making their experience determine who I need to be? So if they are saying something or doing something and it's large or whatever, do I still shapeshift or do I stand in my truth? So this is the thing that comes up, and this is what I'm curious if you've ever experienced this or been aware of um, this wall. So there's a difference between being self-conscious and being present. So the main idea here is when I'm intensely concerned with how I'm being perceived, it's impossible for me to be present. I'm looking at myself through imagined eyes. Like, how do I look? Do I sound intelligent? Do they like me? Am I enough? And I can tell that I would do this so often because I would forget people's names. I'm not saying that everyone who forgets people's names is doing this, but this was my experience is I would meet someone new and then I would start thinking like, what are they thinking? Like all these things I just said, like, how do I look? How am I being perceived? And they would tell me their name. And then because I'd been so self-concerned, self-conscious, non-present, basically, what's the opposite of presence? Absence. I was absent in my own thoughts about how I was being perceived. Of course, I couldn't remember their name. That, like, that's a huge thing for me to, or anyone to become aware of, because I think, so what became the most important thing? And can you see how that creates a wall? And it isn't really just between me and the other person. The wall is between me and and myself in the present moment. So, how much of my attention is spent experiencing another person versus imagining their experience of me? Can you see how that works? Has anyone else ever felt any of this? What am I actually missing out on when I'm watching myself from the outside and I'm not actually there? It's actually a form of dissociation. And yes, I was doing that a lot. Ah, Michelle. Yes. And then another question. Oh, I want to hear let me ask this last question. I want you to respond because I know you've got something good to say.
Oh,
What happens in my body when I stop trying to make a particular impression? So, what's happening in my body when I'm not present? I'm hypervigilant. I'm in my head. I'm not actually in my body. So, it's hard for me to identify, for me, what's going on in my body. Because I'm disconnected from it. It's the opposite of embodiment. So, when people used to talk about embodiment, I'm like, what does that actually mean? What it actually means is that we're not living in our minds thinking about things. We're actually here saying, oh, that feels really juicy. That feels so beautiful to be present, to experience with all of the senses that I've been given, which are more than five or six, by the way. If we're really present, it transcends time. We're in this eternal now moment with this other being that we're not separate from. And it becomes almost like a communion. But can you see uh, how putting this wall up unknowingly, unwittingly, actually changes who I am in any given moment because I've become so accustomed to being living up in here instead of just dropping down into my body and being present in the moment. And think of how much of my life have I missed out on being present with other and self because I thought it needed to look and be in a certain way. For why? What was that protection? What was I actually protecting? And now as I think about it, it's my ego. My ego was when we're living from our head and our thoughts, we're in our ego and the perception of what our personality is. How am I presenting myself? But when I come back down into presence, I'm in my soul self, which isn't ego driven and not worried about being perceived a certain way, but just showing up in full presence. Then you're living from a different space. You're not in your head thinking, how am I being perceived? My ego needs to be propped up by this idea of myself. Peter Crone talks about us becoming addicted to the idea of ourselves. And so we live from that. And I'm like, that is the most true thing. We're addicted to our stories. Well, this is how I am. This is how I present myself. Oh, I'm a people pleaser. Oh, I'm a perfectionist. Can you see how I'm giving attention even tonight by talking about it. So the idea is, yes, we awareness is what we're trying to bring to this. And then we don't keep turning towards it saying, oh, I've lived my whole life doing this. Oh, isn't that horrible? It's more saying, now with the information that I have, and I know the compass of how I want and do feel when I let that go, that's where I'm headed. That's where my attention goes. Because now I'm not living from my story. I'm living from the moment with each moment and what it brings, what it gives, what how I can receive it, how I can be with it. And that is very different than trying to control it. Does that make sense? My sister, Tammy, tells a story about her husband, Scott. And it's very beautiful. And I will say that he is very good at this. She tells the story about when he enters a room, instead of him saying, "Here I am," he says, "There you are." And it's very beautiful because you're giving your attention to to it's you're not just so worried about here. But I have something to say about that because when I think of that in the way that I used to be, I would be so self-concerned, not really, I would be hyper vigilant, trying to, like, there you are, but what are you thinking? And here I am, but how am I being perceived? So it was really this convoluted thing of like, is it selfish to say, here I am right here, and there you are right there. Can we both be here in this present moment without me trying to overthink it? So I love the idea of there you are, but I also like the idea of here I am now. Here I am in presence, and I'm not in my head, and I don't need to be thinking or worried about how I'm being perceived because that's none of my business. How you might be projecting things onto me or thinking something, and I don't need to worry about that. I've spent a lot of time worrying about how I'm perceived. So to stop hiding for me means that I don't wear as many masks, which for me have been makeup, clothes, um, maybe being certain, acting a certain way, like trying to look smart or that I know things or whatever. And that hasn't served me. I can see how that actually has put a wall up and kept me more isolated from others and being just in genuine relationship, not worried. Because when I show up in love, what energy does that give out? When I show up in fear of how I'm being perceived, that's a very different energy. Now I'm worried about what you might be thinking. But when I show up in love, all there is love being given and received. Those are very different energies. And that's what I want to lean into is and I'm probably you have an experience of experiencing other people in their in all their glory, and they're not hiding. They're showing themselves fully. And it's so authentic and it's so real that they inspire you. They inspire me to be more like that. Look at them. They're just being them. There's not an act. There's no Academy Award going on. It's just them being them. And it's imperfect and it's perfectly imperfect. That because we're human. And that inspires me when I see other people doing that for me to be able to show up in my authentic self. So I've been experimenting, not wearing makeup in the day, all day long. Like just what would that be like to go out and how crazy that that is something that used to terrify me. Like not terrify, but maybe on some level, like, wait, I can't really go out unless I have all the masks on, but I wouldn't have considered them that. I think I would have just called them, well, I'm just getting ready to go out. Getting ready for what? Protecting what? So everybody has their why. Everybody has a reason why we live from the ego, something that we're protecting. I'm curious, when you think about what you might be protecting by some of the adaptations that you've taken on over your lifetime, what would that be? Put it in the chat. or speak it out loud. I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Uh, First of all, thank you so much. This is so brilliant and so insightful and so helpful. But as I've been sitting here the whole time, I my mind keeps going back to like when and how did I start this? And I think it was super young, and
Hmm.
it feels like survival, like
Hmm.
especially my siblings, some my parents, but especially just like if I don't, and I think everybody, if you're talking to your grandma versus your boss, there's always going to be some differences. But everything you said, like if it would be hard for me if I would have this kind of people, just like you said, and this kind of people. And then if they would be all together, it would be like, oh no, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
Because I have completely chameleonized for them or this. And even now I was thinking, what am I protecting? And it feels like I feel it in my gut, like feels like
Mm.
sort of that root chakra, like I will
Mm.
die. I will be
Mm.
abandoned by the tribe. I
Hmm.
will not, I will cease to exist.
Yeah. No. It's it's it is so tied to our belonging. It's like we become so skilled, or who do you need me to be? Easygoing? I'll be easygoing. Spiritual? I'll meet you there. Like I can do all the things because I'm a chameleon, but I would never have identified myself as that. I would have said I'm very adaptable, right? I'm very adaptable. I'm very flexible. I can be around all sorts of people. Well, what was the common denominator there? Me, and it's not saying that we can't go out and be with everyone, but if we're not being present, what we're kind of sliding through life to be perceived as a certain way, which is on some level a form of manipulation. That's why it struck me when I heard that. I was like, never would I ever have called it that. And yet, at its deepest core, it's a form of deception because I'm not showing you who I really am. I'm not willing to speak my truth. If I disagree with what you're saying, I don't have to speak it out loud, but do I have to agree? If I am in agreement with everyone, then I am being out of service to myself, right? I feel it. I felt it in my body when I felt like a lump in my throat, when I was like, oh, I can't speak my truth. Because if I say it, they're going to like disagree with me. And it doesn't mean we go around saying our truth in a way that's loud or like have it to prove something, but it's actually being really honest with ourselves. Ah, I'm not really in alignment with that, but that's okay. That's where they're at. Two truths can um exist at this in the same place, and I don't need to convert them to my way of thinking, and the same for them, hopefully. So it's it's so when I think about that last thing that I said about here I am and there you are, is that I can care deeply about you without abandoning myself. Because when people pleasing and perfectionism, trying to be perceived as a certain way, is literally a um it's a way of self-abandonment, if that makes sense. So that sounds kind of harsh, but on some level it's because we're disconnected from ourselves. We don't know exactly how to be in the present moment with ourselves and with other. So we kind of abandon ourselves and say, well, okay, that's a good opinion. That one sounds good. I can stand with that. And then we go over here and well, that sounds good too. But then how disconnected are we from our truth? So it
That's what
is
I ask. How do you know? Like when you're like, yes, there are occasional times where I'll feel that lump, like, I don't know. But I don't even know if I've cultivated the self enough
that's
to
the thing.
know.
Yes, that's the thing. I love that you said cultivated my relationship or an understanding of what actually where I stand. Like what feels really important. Like what are my values? What do I desire? And what what do I want in my life for me and the people that I love, and what does that even look like? And if I am agreement with everyone, then I it's really hard to pull back from that and cultivate a relationship. I mean, one of the most beautiful things is know thyself. What does that even mean? How do you know yourself when you're a shapeshifter? What version of yourself shall I get to know? Can I give compassion to the part of me that ever felt like she needed to shapeshift in order to belong? That's the thing that I want to spend time and become curious about and have so much compassion for, because along the way in this big family, and you have that story too, one of many in a big family, that was for me, it was like, oh, I can be whatever they want me to be. And that works. What a perfect solution. And as a little bitty thing, I learned that. But now the question is, can I remain in relationship with someone else without leaving relationship with myself, without abandoning the one I'm beginning to have compassion for? Because as I sit more in stillness, as I'm more silent and letting those versions finally have their say, have their grief, have their anger for being abandoned, and can I forgive those versions of me for ignore the version of me that has ignored those versions of me? It's both. It's giving and receiving love and compassion from myself for myself and back and forth. And it's yeah, that version of me that wanted to get to know me and I had the wall up. It's both the judger and the judged want compassion. I've said this before, but does that make sense? It's like the one seeking the attention, she wants to be seen, but then I also want to forgive the one that wasn't seeing, and vice versa. Like it's forgiveness and compassion on both sides. And that starts here. Then it can flow so freely into all of our relationships because we have cultivated the capacity for intimacy with self first. What is intimacy? It's a depth of connection. And when we have felt disconnected and separate from others because we have a wall that we didn't even see, it's such a beautiful thing to be able to say, well, now I really get to know myself. What would it feel like to enter a room without needing to prove, perform, impress, diminish, or protect any part of myself? Because now I've given so much love and compassion. I'm not hiding anything. I don't need to protect anything. I'm just me. And if that can't be accepted, then they aren't part of my tribe. Like that doesn't
Related to you.
and that's the thing. I mean, we are in relationship with so many different people. Our families, whether we don't choose our families. Sometimes it can feel sticky because of all of the history. But what if we could let the history, where our attention goes, our energy flows. So if we're giving all the attention to all the things that are wrong about family relationships and dynamics, you will live in that reality over and over because you keep giving it so much attention to what is wrong. That's in anything in life. So when we can say, oh, and actually we don't even need to say, but to stand in our knowingness of ourselves and the love of ourselves, suddenly we're not giving attention to all the things that are wrong. We're like kind of standing in love because that's when we are cultivating that intimacy. What it is it's like turning towards ourselves as if we are the most tender lover.
Mhm.
And that's how we tend to ourselves. Because when we do that, then we are overflowing our bucket of love. It's like we tap into a well that has been there and we were like what's the word? Parched. We were parched, like just starving for that attention, that well, that love, that water, that life force energy. And when we tap into it because we're giving it to ourselves and receiving it from ourselves, Then it's like this flowing thing that, oh, it's so easy to love others. I'm not noticing all the bad because I stopped doing that to myself. I'm not doing it with other. I start noticing all the beauty about me, about who I be and what I've been through, what my story is. And it's not a bad thing. None of it is. It's so beautiful because it's brought me back home, back in relationship with myself. And I remember that I've never been separate from source or other. We're all one. So why would I judge you? Because you're part of me. You're part of my experience here as a human. Every person that we stand in front of. So I'm no longer managing my experience of me because I'm confident that I'm enough. Does that make sense? Now I'm not projecting my fear onto others. Well, do they like me? I'm just confident. I'm like it that's not my job to get them to like me. I'm just being me. And if they don't, that's their stuff. I guess. I don't know. I'm not going to try to shapeshift around it anymore. Can you imagine? I mean, I can just start to feel how much energy I can bring back home because I'm not sending it out into all these different directions, trying to micromanage how I'm being perceived or liked. That's my energy now. And it comes back home to me. It's like these energetic tendrils. I had a teacher say this once, and I was like, ooh, I love that visual. All of your energetic tendrils get to kind of come back home. You unfurl them and you bring them back home to you. That's a lot for me. That's a lot of energy that was being sent out. Micromanaging, hypervigilance, all of that. The chameleonization of all of my relationships. And now that energy is coming back home to tend to me, knowing me deeply. And that there are no words. I mean, why do people even talk about it? It's worth talking about because the the effect of the cause is just tending to myself and loving myself and knowing myself in deeper ways and knowing that suddenly, oh, there's been a wall there. I thought that was protecting me, that wall. No, it was keeping me isolated and separate from others. Ha! No wonder I had felt lonely at times. No wonder. Now there's no loneliness because I'm actually showing up for me. Not waiting for someone else to do that for me. That's a gift. And that's what this work does. So maybe coming out of hiding isn't about revealing everything. Maybe it's about it's like no longer spending so much um, energy managing what gets seen. Like, oh, I can only show them this part of me because they wouldn't like that other part. That might, if I let them see that, I might not belong. But can you see how the energy of fear actually creates a dynamic with the person in your relationship with? And it's hard for them to show up in their full love because what you've magnetized now is fear. Does that make sense? If everything is energy and what the signals we're sending out are real, whether we see them or not, but the more we see them, the more we're like, oh, that isn't love. That's kind of control. That's ego. That's thought. That's not the truth. I want to be honest. And when I show up in honesty, I'm not wearing a mask. And it gets to be both and. I'm not saying we shouldn't wear makeup and we can't have a style that how we express ourselves. That's not what I'm saying. I think it wants to be it's Tao, Taoism. I love the teachings of the Tao. The Wu Wei means it's the balanced way. It's it's not being this far over here and it's not being this far over here. So it's not like, oh, I can't wear makeup ever again because that would mean I'm being inauthentic. What it's saying is, what is my relationship to why I express and wear certain things or have a certain style or wear makeup sometimes. What it reminds me of the story very quickly, and maybe I've shared it before, but I love the story, and then I'll wrap this up. When I was in my mystery school, her mystery school, one of the first teachings or stories I ever was taught, and it just stopped me in my tracks because it's archetypal for each one of us. It's the story of Inanna, who is a Sumerian goddess, and one of the original stories of resurrection. And that is played out by Persephone in Greek mythology and Christ in the archetypal story of resurrection and birth and death and rebirth and Buddha and many other stories. It's the story of us and our journey here in life as humans. It's the hero's journey and it's archetypal and Jung talks about it and it's been played out in so many, think of every movie, every story. It's the journey of like coming back home. Home to what? So Inanna is the queen of earth and she wants to go visit her sister Eshkigal in hell or the other realms below earth, right? And in order to go visit her sister, and there's different versions of this. So if someone's watching this, they're like, that's not exactly the thing. Yes, I'm just giving it in a quick version of how I have perceived it. That she has to pass 7 thresholds, gates, in order to descend to visit her sister in hell, in the underworld. And she has to give up when she gets to the first gatekeeper, she has to give something up that is hers as an identity. So the first gate is her crown, and she has to give that up. But she's like, but that's my royalty. I'm regal because of this crown. And they're like, if you want to descend, you must give this up. And so she had to like sit with that and weigh it. What is the cost of giving it up? And it's my identity and all these things. So she gives it up in order to pass because that is her goal. And so she goes through her crown and then this lapis like head jewel and then a necklace and then an adornment, something that was wrapped around her, and then her staff, all these things that represent the different chakras and how we identify ourselves with being in survival mode versus being present, right? When we're in survival, we have this thing as a mask, as a protection, and this is my identity. My ego is involved. So there's a lot of fear to give those things up at every gate. That's why it's like when those things get stripped away, it can sometimes we do it willingly, sometimes not so willingly. And the story is that if it's stripped away, it still has value, but it can be so much easier when we willingly offer and surrender these identities of who we think we be. So she goes down the 7 gates. She gives up something very meaningful to her, which is her ego, as these things are identified, as she has identified them as her. She gets down there, and I forget the whole interaction with her sister, but I don't think she's received well, and she dies. I can't remember whether her sister kills her or whether how that happens. I need to study that more. But she dies and she hangs on the hook for 3 days. 3 days, right? You can see all the symbolism here of Christ's resurrection, dead for 3 days. And then she rises up and she comes back to life. And she is going to ascend again. But she reaches the first gate and she's offered the same thing back that she gave up at that gate. But she is not the same. What she gave up was a part of what she identified as herself, but it wasn't her true self. Now she's died to the old way and she is resurrected. And so she comes back, gathers each of those 7 things from the 7 thresholds as she ascends, but she now is in different relationship with each one of those things because they don't identify who she is. She understands the power of those things not as an adornment, but as something that she has integrated because she has learned a lesson of what it was that was an armor and a protection and a wall from her truest self. So she ascends and she becomes again the queen of the earth, but in a very different way. Can you see how this story repeats in our lives over and over? We never just have one descent. We never have just one awareness of, oh, my perfectionism for my people pleasing and my perfectionism has been a form of manipulation. And it's so good. Have that awareness. And now, how do you integrate that awareness into who you be now? How can I step closer into my truest nature, which doesn't need any protection? It doesn't need any mask. It can fully show up in its as it's in its truth without any fear of being judged because I'm not judging myself anymore. Can you see that? I don't worry so much what others are thinking and judging about me if I'm not judging me. If I'm okay and accepting of me, that signal goes out and it changes. It changes how I'm in relationship with everyone. People don't feel that well. I'm more honest, I'm more real and authentic, and that gives people permission to do the same. So, tonight I wanted to speak this because it's been moving through me like I've never had it move through me before. I've had awarenesses of it, but this is like an experiment in showing up in my authenticity, waking up, not even looking in a mirror sometimes, and going out and experiencing the world. And I'm like, wow, I'm still a happy person and I'm still not so bothered or worried about like what I'm wearing and how I'm being perceived and I'm even posting without makeup, without all the stuff. And I'm like, and that's okay. Maybe someone's saying something about it, but that doesn't concern me. I'm just more free. It's more space to be liberated and like take a deep breath. It's like my whole nervous system is like, isn't that beautiful? Just I don't need to perform so much. That feels like a breath of fresh air for me. That's been my experience. And I know it's not everyone's, but if it has been your experience, the invitation is how can you keep showing up for yourself in every present moment where your nervous system can say, thank you. Thank you. That feels delicious. It's easier than we think. So, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for, I don't know, I think it's a radical act of self-care to like show up and think about these things. Because a lot of times we get really busy and we don't think about why we do things or why we don't do things. So it's beautiful when it's a way to know thyself. What we are doing when we show up for ourselves is we are deepening and increasing our capacity for intimacy with self, with all the ways to be in relationship with ourself. And when we are doing that simultaneously without knowing, it's not the why, but we are increasing our capacity for intimacy and depth with other. And why are we even here if we're just on the surface? Let's get to know each other. The thing that our sacred needs are to be seen, heard, and understood. We think by other, but with ourselves first. When we do that, it becomes like this natural thing to do with other. And that's what we're here to do is connect. Connect to source, connect to other, connect to self. Be present. Yeah, that's that heals a lot of mental health issues when we can just be present and stop being up in here worrying about all the things. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for sharing part of yourself and your heart tonight, Michelle. Um, and others who are watching this, who were here and had to check off, and people who are watching this later. I will be good about getting this out and send out an email. I've kind of been I haven't had a lot of connectivity. I finally slowed everything down and I'm on this farm and I have my Starlink set up here because I finally don't have trees all around me in the redwoods. So it felt important tonight to just be here and just check in and just say, how are you all doing? And send out love to you all. And thank you for being here. And Michelle, stay for just a second. I'd love to talk to you, but I'm going to shut this down. Once again, I'm going to be here next week and we'll talk some more about the things that are moving through all of us. Okay, ciao.